Welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly roundtable show where we discuss all sorts of things fire service related. We meet each Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and tonight we're going to be talking with Joe Starnes, the Project Kill the Flashover. We're going to get an overview, a quick presentation on Project Kill the Flashover, what it's about, and that sort of thing. And then if we have time, we're going to do some questions after, both from the panel and from the audience. So speaking of the panel, if you are watching us live on YouTube, please feel free to leave a YouTube comment, and we'll bring you into the panel. We'll get you involved in the discussion. And if you were on Twitter tonight, if you use the hashtag FFT, Firefighting Today, KTF, lots of initials there, FFT KTF, we should be able to follow that discussion as well. Everything seems to be working the way it should be with our comment tracker and all sorts of stuff that we're talking about. So hopefully that'll work out well for us. We'll introduce the panel. First and foremost, my name is Pete Liam. I'm the author of PeteLiam.com and the host of the Firefighter Training Podcast. Warren, tell the folks who you are and introduce yourself.
Good evening. I'm Warren Whitley, retired Assistant Chief from Prince William County in Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. Now enjoying life down on the waterfront in North Carolina.
Great. Thanks for being here, Warren. And for those, Warren is also the guest this week on the Firefighter Training Podcast, talking about from the classroom to the fireground. So that's a good conversation. I encourage you to check that out. Rob, say hello.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Rob Fling, First Assistant Chief with the Dick Sills Fire Department out on Long Island, and also the founder of Face Peace On.
All right. Always good to have you with us, Rob. Thanks. Joe Starnes.
Joe Starnes, Oak Grove Volunteer Fire Department, Public Information Officer and resident geezer. I am also one of the project managers for Project Kill the Flashover.
Thank you, Joe. John Dixon, say hello.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, fellas. My name is John Dixon. I'm a lieutenant in the Teaneck, New Jersey Fire Department. I'm happy to be with you all tonight.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Frank, say hello.
Frank Blackley, Assistant Chief, Wilmington, North Carolina Fire Department, over Administrative Services.
Thank you, Frank. And our second John Haywick, say hello.
Good evening, gentlemen. John Haywick, Lieutenant, City of Passaic Fire Department. Here to enter in on this great discussion for tonight. I'm one of the skeptics that are starting to come over, so guys we're talking about. So I can throw some questions out there for Joe.
All right, great stuff. We like alternate opinions here. We like that. Ethan, say hello.
Ethan Bansek, Lorraine, Ohio, student of the trade and founder of Passed On Fire Training.
Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate it. And last but certainly not least, Adam.
Adam Ganoy, captain with the Kellogg Fire Department here in Kellogg, Iowa.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. And Tim's here. Tim Lasley is watching. He's already thrown out some tweets to the audience, so thank you, Tim. I appreciate you doing that. Hopefully our lag time is pretty close. I saw that one come up right away, so that's good news. So lots of debate, lots of discussion. Much of it has frustrated me going on in the fire service today. So what I'd like to do is be able to talk about what is the Kill the Flashover project. I'm going to just start with an open question to Joe. And Joe, I think you've got some stuff you want to present to us. But Joe, what is the mission statement, if you will? What is the purpose of Kill the Flashover?
Well, we're in the business of identifying, defending, or killing the flashover event, or what we call the extreme fire behavior event, and that for the purpose of preventing thermal injuries to interior fire attack crews. And we use extreme fire behavior. If you've been following some of the conversations overseas and here, there's quite a bit of discussion about that term scientifically and as a trade slang. We use it more as a trade slang. It basically says that an extreme fire behavior event is something that exceeds the engineering of your personal protective equipment. So that's what's extreme for us. So we'll get into that a little later, Prom.
All right. Well, I think that's a good basis that's a good launching pad, Joe. Why don't you go ahead? You've got some slides. Why don't you go ahead with those slides if you don't mind? Let's jump right into it.
Okay, I don't see my share with everything, Chief.
I've got you already presenting to everybody. I'm actually controlling that. So can everybody see the slides? Just a thumbs up from my film strip folks. Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. So you should be, our viewers should be able to see that and be aware of what's going on. So,
well, what we did the other night with the White Bear Lake, Chief, is kind of what I've got up here. I hope that's what you had in mind.
Yes.
So the point, we won't be too much into what KTF does right down to the detail as much as why. What we talked about was why evaluate this research that everybody's talking about. Why even do the research? KTF started in about 2011. We had its first burn. And of course, a couple of KTF staff members are here on the panel tonight. Chief Whitley was there day one, so he knows probably more about it than I do. So I may have him answer the questions. But why evaluate the research? What's new? Is there a new level of capability for what we do, and is there a new level of risk, better, less risk, more managed risk? Is that available to us? So the research for me came very, very specifically because of my son, and Chief Oak and I met about our kids and said he knew a lot about Agent, and I had spent some time hanging around with Warren and his friends, mainly John Taylor at the time and Jim Maston, and since '94, and we listened to some stuff about fire behavior, fire science, and TAC and Flashover that I hadn't listened to as a fire chief at the time, and so is there a new level of capability that there's a capability out there? Is it there, and are we ignoring it? And if we are ignoring it, why? And so if there's a better risk model for interior firefighting, then what is it and why? So that's kind of the point of the story. Does it require a new approach? Is that just one thing? One of the hard parts for us has been that to assimilate this knowledge, it's not taking one thing and going and adding it to what you do, because it just doesn't seem to totally work that way. If Chief Brunacini said something the other week when we were in Notre Dame. He said jokingly, he said to someone else, he said the what people will always work for the why people. So what's hard to assimilate this change, this discussion has been that this requires us to have quite a bit of a paradigm shift. We almost have to reset to zero and rebuild the puzzle of how we address the fire. One of the things we jokingly kid about is that once you start to get this, you will never see the fire the same way ever again. And that's been true about anybody I've worked with in this business. And so one of the things for KTF was to connect the fire science class to the management of fire behavior. And I think you and Warren probably covered that better than I could ever cover it today. So the bottom line is, what is it? What's so different about it? It's not new so much as it might be new to me. So in every fire service, one of the things I find so interesting about all these debates is simply that they debate things, and then the difference becomes in the way I do it or you do it. So we have to be able to assimilate this knowledge and put it together. So KTF was basically started by putting some basic stuff and saying, is that really true? Is that a myth, or it's almost like the Mythbusters? Is it true? Is it true in every aspect of the way in context, or is it just true in this one context? How is it applied? And so you might say close the door, for instance, and that might mean something to you. For instance, in closing the door, If I put a shot of water in a stream, and what we use enhanced water streams, if we put a shot of that stream into that opening before we shut that door, when that smoke starts to build behind that door, if it was flowing out that door before and you shut the door and now it starts to fill up that void behind the door, if you put a shot of water there, it won't flame. If you don't put a shot of water there, that turbulence will be the ideal mixture, and I'll get a flame burst for a little bit, and then it'll go away. All right, flaming is something I don't want. We had thermal couplers at the top of the stairs in 2013, and when you went to the top of the stairs and they shut the door, it destroyed that set of thermal couplers simply because we didn't put any water in that space. It won't burn if you put solution in there or water in there. The fire has to get rid of the moisture before it can actually start to pyrize or off gas, and it won't sustain combustion. Take a match, take a glass of water, light it, stick the match in the water, and the match is going out. It cannot. That's a lot of moisture, but Mother Nature does it on house fire. So it's not just one thing. We talk about in KTF. We talk about the bar stool, the three-legged bar stool. We talk about flow path management or air track management, as John Taylor would call it. We talk about enhanced water streams, that basically a stream that has an agent in it. The water does the work. The agent does nothing but keep that water around. So if that water stays, the fire has to get rid of it to burn. That's all the agent does. And when we talk about giving us more time, a window of opportunity to fight fire, it's there. For instance, if we crawl down a hallway trying to make access to a target room, if we actually put that stream on that couch is in our room, when that couch hits its off-gassing temperature, let's just pick a number, let's say it's 350 degrees, when it starts to off-gas at 350 degrees, fuel, it's off-gassing the vapors and the fuel, but it's also off-gassing that heat. So it's adding that 350 to that room. If I put that stream on it and that water stays on top of that couch, that water has to be evaporated prior to that couch pyrizing. Not only does it do that, the chemistry of turning that water into steam eats up a lot of energy for that firefight. So that room actually becomes a lot cooler and a lot safer for that fire crew, and increases that window of opportunity for them to advance if they can advance. And we talk about thermal data. Thermal data is you have two views of every fire in our world, and that is an optical view and a thermal view. We've learned so much about thermal views, looking for cold spots. The fire is going where the dynamic, where the air intake is coming from. If I've got air coming down a hallway to the fire room or the target room, eventually that fire is coming back to where that air is entering that room at. That's where it's headed. You can take a thermal imager and see a cold spot because it's showing contrast like you can see a hot spot. There's more to it than what we've been giving it credit for. If we're in a bidirectional flow, if we got an exhaust going out and an air intake going in, and we dive under that exhaust flow, don't control the air on the bottom side, that air intake is where that fire is headed. That flaming is going to occur where the two intakes and exhausts are going in different directions, rub each other, are connected to each other. When they meet, it's like a weather phenomenon. You get turbulence there, and when you get turbulence, you get mix, and then the ideal mixture comes, and if you can auto-ignite or you have flame contact, then that's going to burn. One of the first ahas for me with John Taylor was we watched that neutral plane develop. We watched that flaming come down the hall at the neutral plane, go outside, mix everything outside, light off, and then come back in down the hallway. So now not only was the firefighter in a flash, the firefighter was actually had the nozzle turned the wrong direction where everything was mixing and lighting off. It was kind of an 8-second money shot for about 6 years of videotaping everything. So it's more than one thing. It's a bunch of things. to achieve this new level of capability, you almost have to know what your capability today is. What are you doing at this moment? How do you fight fire? I don't think anybody has to change to anybody else's pattern or anything. I think what they have to do is evaluate what they do with the reality of what they know about what happens to the fire. If you look at a fire, what your tactic will either grow or decay the fire. If you're not decaying the fire with your tactic, relook your tactic. That's a dangerous thing. Our whole basis of go, no-go created a lot of controversy. And we hear it a lot in the industry now, but I honestly believe go, no-go was created in 2013. And so one of the things that came out of that, especially for thermal imaging and evaluating and assessing a fire, one of the things that came out of that was, can you tell from the thermals, how well can you tell if you've got a growth state or decay state? Is the neutral plane coming towards the floor? Is it rising towards the ceiling? Are the temperature, it's a palette temperature of the thermal imager, or what are they? Did they change? Did you baseline it? How to use a thermal imager? Are you checking what I call now, next, future, then past? In other words, what's going on around you right now, what's going on down a few feet from you, and where are you headed, that future. And then look behind you and see if that changed. And then lastly, what we talked about, my son talks about a lot, is those 4 places, and then come back and say, what's the gear doing on my firefighter crew? Did I preheat it outside? Now is it even hotter? Have I lost those minutes of protection that gear is going to give me? So what is the difference, or we call delta? If I don't have a difference, then very little is known. You can't determine next until you know the difference. And what does it mean when I say future? I'm headed down the hallway to a room on the right that is the target fire room. Am I going to fight that room from inside that fire room? Today's world, we push inside. In the world we advocate, you kill that fire from the outside of that room at the door casing, or outside in the firefight. You kill that temperature. You make that almost a vent-limited fire if you can before you ever make entry in that room. And we're not even talking about the physics of the constructions and the capability of the structure. We're just talking about thermals. If I go to a room and I go in, we had a fire in 13 where we went up a stairwell. We'd go in that room and then go to the left and go into a closet. We know that if we have a vent-limited fire and we shut the door at the top of that, we put some stream in that room and we shut the door on that stairwell and keep it closed for about 20 seconds, we'll get a temperature drop in that room if it doesn't have air. Matter of fact, we'll get a significant drop, 400 to 800 degrees, depending on what we started with. That fire cannot survive without air. So that's part of knowing the difference. So in my day, when I came up, I was taught the fire triangle and then later the fire tetrahedron. If I look at this triangle, all that I'm doing is fighting the heat side. I never was taught to fight the oxygen side. I didn't use the oxygen to fight fire. I would use to get more oxygen so I could see in my cotton duck coat, or I could actually identify where the fire is by simply breaking things till it started burning, then I knew where it was. And then I didn't do much with the fuel unless the fuel's outside in a tank or a truck or something that I can remove the fuel or turn the valve off. So in the early days, all I ever did was talk about the fuel. So to get started to change this stuff, one of the things we advocate is you need to change your paradigm. To change your paradigm, you first need to change your words. Well, a lot of people are talking about that. They're talking about fighting it with just the heat side, or fighting it with the oxygen side, or fighting it with the heat, oxygen, and the chemical chain reaction. If I don't allow it to polarize, and I can use an agent, and that agent can keep that water on that product of combustion, and I don't polarize, I don't add heat, nor do I allow it to contribute to a vapor flash or a gas flash in that room, I have made my risk tremendously much safer. I have managed my risk. I'm giving myself more discretionary time. To quote Gordon Graham, what we're saying is high risk, low frequency, non-discretionary time is really where we ought to spend our risk management time. and that's what happens here. So you can get the information in a lot of places. Here's UL's site. That site has a tremendous amount of research and a tremendous amount of science on it. You can go to the father of all that, which is NIST, and go to the Gov Fire Research site, and you can find Dan's work and NIST work there for years. That's all stuff that we need to be paying attention to. There are people out there who are talking a lot about it. There are people who are making comments like they really know what's going on. Some of them are, some of them don't. If you say close the door, what else did you cause? Why did you close the door? What about it? We've said hard from the yard to name some stuff. We've used slicers. The ISSFSI group have done a lot of work, a lot of good work around creating this acronym and about rescue and salvage as opportunities. A lot of controversy around those words and around fighting the fire from the outside and the flow of the nozzle. There's more to be learned in using the nozzle to its best effect than there are in saying one nozzle is the only nozzle. It matters what you know about what you're doing with the stream. If you're up close and you pushed yourself up under a thermal threat, you better fight fire close up to you. If you fought fire from 30 feet back and you've been fighting from 30 feet back the whole length of the time you've been traveling, the imminent threat when you get to the next control point, the next spot you pick, it's probably going to be way less than it would have been if you waited to get to that one spot to fight fire. So we have Project Kill the Flashover. We do test burns. We do one a year. We talk about them all year long. We look at video. We look at thermocouple data. We write a few hypotheses. Like this year, there will be some written. Probably the most talked about part of this next 15 will be the hoarder burns, burning actually tactics in hoarding houses. That we're going to talk about a lot about conditioning this year and what conditions the benefits are of conditioning. We're going to talk a lot about some false positive with gear for thermal imager. We're going to talk about thermal imaging and its capability and do some tests there. You can go on the site. There's a bunch of research link sites. You can almost find, well, I won't say, you can find literally hundreds of links there. So all those are there. So what's this mean to you? Well, we think it's about heat. It's about decaying or growing the heat or the heat problem or the heat impact. So what are you doing to do that? You can do it by adding oxygen or taking away oxygen. You can do it by adding water, taking away water. We talk about the stream inside, the thermal balance. We talk about the impact of the nozzle on the fire compartment, and all those types of things. And a lot of them we talk about without knowing what we really are talking about. You know, what scared me about this, Chief, is that one of the things that scared me a lot was I was a fire instructor for a lot of years. I was just as passionate about what I said then as I am now. I just know more than I did then, I think. And I had a boss one time say to me, you know, Joe, I didn't lie to you. The truth changed. She was talking business. And I think a lot of that is what we really mean today is we didn't lie to you, but the truth has gotten more sophisticated and the truth has changed. So KTF basically looks at the ability to prevent thermal injuries to interior firefighters by understanding and having knowledge of air management or flow path, if you will, enhanced water streams and thermal data. And we do that to make sure that we can manage the fire behavior to inside the limits of our gear and ability to protect ourselves. So one of the things that we've used curtains. We've used curtains to block airflows. We've used pulsing. We've used the ability to put it in the under pressure and the over pressure. We talk about 48 inches and down. If you look at in a residential fire, and this is what this discussion is about, Where is most of the fire load? Most of the fire load is 48 inches and down. If I start my stream at the 48-inch and down mark, it's like turning the valve off on a gas tank. The top's going to go out. Thermal on the top side is going to go out. If I stop the off-gassing and I cool the flaming will stop when the gas goes away. It's that simple. We talk about the 4 phases that we talk about addressing this. I call them detect, define, access, and then favorably influence. Accessing the compartment, the skills necessary to access the compartment is very, very different than the skills that we use to extinguish the compartment. In the past, my training has been people have taught me the same set of skills almost to get to the compartment with a nozzle as the skills necessary to extinguish that compartment. They are entirely different if you accept the new model. The PPE, why do we wait till we have to feel it to be able to say we're too hot? We know now that it's a big sponge. When we start to feel our heat through our gear, we're in trouble. We just got a mask that went up in temperature. Firefighters are telling me that they can't feel it through the mask. They used to feel it through the mask. Now it's getting hotter before they feel it. This feeling stuff has got to go away, and we've got to quit. People say that I'm dumbing down the fire service, but it's not dumbing down the fire service. It's actually making it more intelligent. We need to use the TIC to look for, like we say, there's been this big argument about you can't use the TIC. It's not a good indication of a floor of a basement fire when you go into the floor. No, it's not a good indication. But if you've got seepage of heat and gas through pipes, through the cracks of the edge of the floor, you will see that. If you see that, you know you've got a problem. You can't just ignore that. If you know where the high thermals are, it's better than looking at trying just to read smoke optically. If I have a curtain on a door, if I go to a door and it's a front door, let's say I'm on the A Alpha division and I'm going in that accessing that resident through that A door, if I close that door or open that door and I leave it open 8 or 10 inches, I'm still outflowing at the top of that door. If I put that curtain on the top, when I do that, I'm not outflowing anything. The neutral plane's got to come down to the bottom for it to start to off-gas outflow from that door. The speed at which that gas leaves that compartment is the velocity of that is correlative to the amount of air going in that compartment. That's the delta on the pressure, on the low and high pressure. You need to understand that kind of stuff if you're going to accept this new capability. You know, we talk bidirectional. If you're crawling under a bidirectional flow, you're on a clock. It's ticking when you do that. The fire is coming to you, and you don't know how fast. If a window breaks and you haven't pre-hung a curtain in that window, then that's going to create a flow path. Flow paths will develop in as little as 10 seconds, and as long as it takes for the air to get there in the pressure differential. So you can't do much to defend yourself in 10 seconds. So, and Warren, thank you. That bidirectional flow is a horizontal chimney. It is just a chimney. If you take a stove and turn it sideways, that's exactly what you got. And if you're in that flow path and you're not controlling that, the fire's coming to you. It's the bottom line, it's coming to you. And we seem to like the race. We seem to like to hit the door, throw it open, vertical vent, and go there. When we vertical vent, what we've done with the front door open is created a very high velocity flow path to that fire. When that occurs, that's the reason they emphasize coordinated attack. Hopefully you can do a coordinated attack now. The other piece that people don't think of is, and John and Andy did this a lot, they use the phrase tactical patience. People talk about weenie firefighting, hitting it from the outside. I will assure you, if you go to one of KTF's burns, you kill the extreme behavior from the outside through the under pressure side of the window, for instance. then you hang a curtain and you go under that curtain and you go inside to an environment that's got a smoke storage almost down to your head, and you stick your body into that, and the only thing you're guiding yourself with is feel and the thermal imager, you won't call it weenie firefighting. Now, what they don't know is that plug, not directly thermally heated, is not going to get higher than about 500 degrees at the ceiling and about 200 degrees at the 40-inch mark. And if I start to cool those gases, I will control that, and what will be behind me will cool off significantly as I move towards that fire compartment area. So we've got a lot to learn, Chief, and we've got a lot of things. That's what KTF's about. We say, we test, we demonstrate, you decide. So you've got to make the decision in your own fire department. I would challenge everybody to take their own tactics and look at them and see, is the fire going to grow until you get water on it, or did you decay the fire from the word go? On vent-limited fires, we are talking about here mainly, if on vent-limited fires, you should be able to decay that fire and not allow it to grow to make your fire attack. And that's what the objective is. It's safer from you when you do that. If you know more about it with a thermal imager, if you're able to manage that flow and not allow window breakage to do that, never break windows on your path there. If you're closing doors and isolating compartments, you're able to do. See, I think it's not all rescue, not all search, or not all fire control. I think every search, every rescue has to have a flow path management plan and supported with resources to do it wisely. I think the victim's got a greater chance of being saved. I think the firefighter's got a greater chance of not being injured or fatally killed. And I think the whole fire itself, the fire event itself, is better off or favorably influenced when that happens. And so anyway, Chief, that's my take, and I hope that was somewhere close to what you expected.
No, that was great, Joe. That was great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Couple of we'll entertain some questions for Joe. If you can shut off your screen share, Joe, that'd be great. Just real quick, I want to share a couple of things. Thank you, Tim. Tim is doing a great job pushing this out on Twitter. This is one of his tweets out on Twitter with the hashtag FFTKTF, talking about the thermal data views, flow paths, etc., stream fire behavior. Talking an awful lot about using thermal imager. He's able to get a bunch of this stuff out on Twitter. So I appreciate your efforts here, Tim, to get this stuff out. It's great stuff. You're being very helpful in talking about the stuff that we're broadcasting here. So, Joe, I guess what I'm hearing is that the point is this is all about. Let me see if I can. I cannot shut off comments now, which is kind of strange, but that's okay. We'll go to somebody else. John Hayworth, you said you might have questions. We've got three main parts to KTF. It's the airflow, the thermal imager, and the enhanced water streams. What questions do you have? John, are you still with us?
Yeah, I keep the audio keeps cutting out every once in a while. The bandwidth is eating up, I'm guessing.
Sorry.
No, it's what I'm learning from this, and I sat in on a class by John Dixon doing modern fire behavior the other weekend. Just different tactics and learning that everybody's got to be on the same page with that. I believe that there's an underusage of the thermal imaging camera, as the chief has been saying, and it's something that's opening up my eyes. Again, I was one of these skeptics at first, but I'm starting to learn, and knowledge is better, and we're just keep moving forward with this. Not really more of a question, but more of a comment. Thank you, Chief, for your knowledge you're bringing forth.
Okay. Warren, do you want to dive in here at any point?
As far as what, I mean, Joe's hit quite a wide variety of things KTF's been looking at and I've been involved in. I think one of the important points to make, and we talked about on the podcast, is you see all these comments on the various social media about, as Joe said, weenie firefighters, things like that. And I think it's important to keep in mind that fire does not think at all. It's a dumb phenomenon. It only reacts based on physics and the environment it's in and what it has available. Whereas we have this little computer up in our head that we should be using to our advantage. And people talk about the professionalization of the fire service. Well, if you want to be truly a professional, you have to have as much knowledge as you can get. Because to be the professional, you need to be an expert in what you're doing. So learning new things is one way to do that, keeping abreast of changes and all the research that's going on. The one thing that's tied all this stuff back is none of this stuff is really new. It's just how do we apply it to modern construction and to the knowledge base that our firefighters seem to be lacking just because of changes that have happened over the last 50, 60 years when the old guys kind of knew some of this stuff anyway.
Yeah, and not only do we do that, but we have to apply it. I think one of the keys, one of the nuggets that I take away from Joe every time he speaks is this. Apply this to your department and your circumstances. If you have 31 people hitting a first alarm and you have the ability to manage simultaneous tasks and get water quickly and do a bunch of stuff, this may be different for you. If you're responding with 2 people on the tanker at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of the United States, then maybe you need to change the way you think a little bit. And I think the whole message of KTF with you test, they test, you decide, I think what we're doing is saying, and the other thing we talked about a little bit is this whole, you're a sissy firefighter if you do this. Okay, so I'll be a sissy chief if I do this. I'll be a sissy chief as long as I try not to kill my men or put them in the burn unit. I'm okay with that title. If that's what you think a sissy chief is, that he didn't want to kill his men and he didn't want to kill the people that were out to serve, yeah, okay, I'll take it. I'll take that moniker. Yeah, go ahead, Warren.
One thing that brings up, if we're talking about applying knowledge and using intelligence, is if you work smarter and not harder, especially if you're in a busy company, if I'm not heat sinking my gear or even my body or my brain, and we get this fire knocked down from the outside, take care of business, clean up, we're ready for the next call. And we're exposing our bodies to less risk because we don't have all that stored up heat in our gear, in our bodies, wherever, and we're actually becoming more efficient. Even if it's just the one call you run a year, you reduce the risk to yourself if you can apply some of the tactics, some of the knowledge you hear about that goes against what the traditional U.S. firefighter has done.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, talk a little bit. Give me the short summary of you mentioned it in your discussion. I want to leave room for questions, but I want to throw some info out there. Explain to me your version of conditioning. That is, I've got an enhanced water stream. I put something in it, some agent, some class A, whatever it is, I put in it. You have a particular product you use, but I put something in. What do you call conditioning and how is it used? And then, John Dixon, I'm going to go back to you on this one after Joe to talk about your experience just recently about how you preconditioned something and your thoughts on that. So, Joe, what is preconditioning? Explain that a little more, if you would.
Well, we didn't create it. Paul Grimwood used the term 3D. It's basically getting water on something that the environment is heating up, so that the heat has to deal with the water, not with the product of combustion. So if I'm putting water on something that I'm crawling past to head to a target fire room, what I've done is give myself a lot more time to work, simply because now that fire has to get rid of that water. And that brings that temperature down. So if I condition, including in the U.S. carpet, we get a lot of contact burns with carpet. If I condition that environment so that when it heats, then I don't get the off gassing. Not only do I not get the fuel, I don't get the heat, and it will be a lot cooler, especially behind me. One of the things I wanted to say to you, Chief, is this: we do ourselves a disservice teaching young firefighters to fight fire. We build an even an acquired structure. I just attended a couple in the last month. We build a fire in a room that's one door away. You got to go in a door, make a left, go into that fire room. We tell them to go, 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 and we push them into that fire room, and they don't flow until they see flame. Well, that's a way late there. If they started flowing way back before then, even without what we call a transitional attack, even without, they wouldn't have a firefight. That's what we want them to have. We don't want them to be in there burning their Scotch light off. We want to condition as we go. If you start, when you do more than that, when you condition around a threshold and that smoke comes under that threshold, it's the same phenomenon that happens with the airplane wing, except it's turned upside down. When that smoke comes under that threshold, the top of that door, it thins out, it's hot, it will light off, it will cause that pressure, more air will go into the bottom, it will increase the burn rate in the fire room, and then it's going to extend the flame contact to the next room. So let's just say you go in a room and you turn your propane tank on and you allow flame. What's that going to do for you? You don't want to do that. You got the same properties and the same physics the same way. You don't want flame extension in the other room, and conditioning stops that. Basically, front and center. Fire cannot deal with water that's in its midst. That's the bottom line.
All right, perfect. John, you were part of the instruction down there on the 18th in October, and when we were critiquing at when the day was over, you mentioned something about conditioning an area and then talking about having a safe area. Do you want to recount that for the audience?
Yeah, sure. The time spent that I conditioned moving into the compartment, the alpha side. And to emphasize Chief Starnes' point is, I was one of those firefighters that were taught that we don't put water on smoke. Wait until you see the flame. And on the 18th in the Fire Behavior University, I conditioned as I moved through the compartment, looking for the seat of the fire. And what I had found was the heat that was behind me as I was moving forward while conditioning, it seemed to be a lot cooler than if I hadn't conditioned. And in the back of my mind as an engine company officer or a truck company officer, knowing that the temperatures or the environment that's behind me is increasingly improving is a safe refuge for me. If I know that I can leave one compartment and go to the next compartment that I've already conditioned in light of an extreme fire behavior event in front of me, to me that buys me more time if I need to regroup and recalculate my next advance. It's almost like the tug of war. You're playing tug of war with the seat of the fire. You know, you're moving, you're conditioning. You're moving, you're conditioning. You know that what the real estate that you have gained as you're moving forward is safer than what it was then if you didn't pass it, if that makes any sense. I just knew that if something was to kick off in front of me, an extreme fire behavior event to kick off in front of me, signs of impending flashover, a lot of flame over, rollover, I know that I could retreat and I'd be in a safer area because I have conditioned that compartment as I was advancing.
Excellent, excellent stuff. Question came up in the chat room, and I'd like to take a stab at it because I'm a training sort of guy. And the question is, you know, how do we even get this in our training academies? How do we get this taught? Because many state academies, certainly many regional county academies, are still teaching existing methods, or, you know, traditional, whatever it is. We got a couple of things. Warren aptly commented, you know, obviously we've got the 1403 standard, which is a challenge to us. We understand why we have it because of horrible training accidents going back all the way to 1982 in Boulder. We've got horrible situations, which is why we have the standard. What's happening now in one of the comments was that the heat release rate is far beyond the couple of pallets and straw that we're throwing in a burn building and showing firefighters. So we certainly have issues. The other problem I think that Rob brings up is that people do not believe this yet. This is some foreign nebulous concept that it's I believe Paul Coombs, the great artist that does a lot of cartoons for us in the fire service, just did this whole thing about it's witchcraft, because I think one of the things, Rob, before it gets into the training, we've got to stop the propaganda. We have to stop the national propaganda that's going on about it's right or it's wrong or it isn't. This happens to be another way to gain information. I hate the phrase tool in the toolbox. It's so overused. I think about it from our first ICS movie, that guy that was running around with the ICS movie, and I think that's that needs to be, that's an overused phrase. It's the tool in the toolbox. This is knowledge that is going to prevent our firefighters from getting injured or killed and make us more effective. You talk about, we haven't talked about, if I can put the fire out faster, that's less water supply. For a guy like Adam out there using tanker shuttles and rural water supply, if I can use less water and be more effective, what's the deal? Isn't there another benefit to that? We've heard comments. Thank you, John, for that. It's not cool. It's not why I joined the fire service. I don't come out, I don't jump under that thermal and crawl in the front door and beat myself up. For some folks, I think that I think how if I'm taking a transitional attack, I'm conditioning the area before I get into the fire room. What good does it do me to put my helmet in the oven? It won't get all blackened like it's supposed to be if I'm a real fireman. So that's an issue. That's an issue. So I think there's a lot of things going on that are affecting the way this is being trained. And I also think Joe mentioned something very politically correctly. It's not something I'm a fan of, but we get a lot of people parroting information that have never been to one of these burns. They're looking at it. Everybody's got a spin. Everybody's got an angle. And I think, I'm frustrated a little bit about that in some ways, certainly. So other questions for Joe? We've got about 10 or 12 minutes. I'd like to get some other stuff on there. Anybody got comments for Joe? Comments or questions? Joe?
Well, John, not John, but Peter, one of the things that I put on there was one of the things we're going to do in 2015 is called fear of knowledge. And part of what's going on right now, this is such a big, and pardon me for using the term, this is such a big paradigm shift. It's not new knowledge. It's a paradigm shift of application, and that itself is driving the market share away from it. And people are scared of this. They're afraid of this. I've watched people attack things on social media with just a picture of one slide in one moment of time, and talk about how the customer is going to die in that slide. There's no way people know that much. They don't even have the background for that, and we don't even have the background to counter it. So when we talk about this stuff, you're right, there's so much propaganda on the street that it's unbelievable. When you put a stream into, I have not yet seen KTF with over 2 megawatts of heat use more than 44 gallons of water, and most of the times it's under 20. Now,
right.
It's not, the slope of that is not linear. It's not going to go, 100 megawatts of heat. It's not going to be the same as 2.5. But the bottom line is the ability to control the air that's the exponential difference. You shut the air off, it doesn't matter how much water you flow. Air is the only thing that you can shut off, and the fire cannot go through the physics without the air. And if it dies in 20 seconds to the tune of 50%, of what's in the room above flashover temperatures, you have no other capability but that to do that kind of firefighting. I don't understand why we wouldn't do that. You know, it's good if Mrs. Smith's on the floor, it's good for Mrs. Smith. This whole thing about dying of steam and all this, it's a nice, righteous, wonderful dream. But let me tell you, if you're in that room and you're not getting fresh air from the flow path, you can forget. If people would talk to me about engineering fresh air to her in a way that they control it, I'd talk to them. But what they're talking about is giving her 15 seconds more to live if she's alive. It doesn't work that way. It just absolutely doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I also think something, you know, you talked about, this is a phrase you use, Joe. I give you credit the first 3 times and then I steal it. But your phrase about window of opportunity, you know, when you've got this bidirectional flow and you're starting to get this mix, I mean, I've heard different numbers, but there aren't many numbers that I've heard that are much more than 120 seconds. I mean, I've heard 90 to 120 seconds. Is that pretty much where you are? I mean, we're talking about a very, very minuscule, if nothing is done, if nothing is controlled in that 120 seconds or changed. Is that a valid statement or not, Joe?
You know, and those numbers come from burns, and a lot of them come from residential and apartment burns. We know it, yes. The numbers that have been publicized have not been much over 2 minutes at the most, anything I've seen. I've seen neutral zones go to the floor in 10 seconds. Fastest I've ever seen is 8 seconds, and that was with 1 couch and 1 chair. And so if you're talking about what it is really, you know, am I in a cathedral ceiling? Am I in a meeting mansion? How many cubic feet of air am I moving? What's going on? I mean, the numbers, here's the deal, though. You said it. If the lower limit is 10 seconds and you hook a hose on your way to that room, you better be able to defend yourself. Because if you can't, something as simple as a hose getting hung up for a second or two for you to turn around and do it is enough to put you out of business. So that raises, why do that when you can control that? When you can manage that. The other thing about putting a stream, this thing of putting a lot of water into a room is great. Water puts out fire, no doubt. But if John and Andy use the term tactical patience all the time, if I put water in there and then I bring that cooling down to a vaporization level, I get contraction. On a hot day on a propane tank, what's it do? It expands and fuel comes out the pop-off valve. If I put it at 10 degrees below zero, what does it do? You barely can get it to come out of the tank. So contraction is a big piece. We're not playing the whole game. We're using the myth and the propaganda of our old ways with a heat release rate that's really different than it's ever been. All our engineering, our number of lines on the truck, our flow rates, everything is based on a set of stuff that we developed in the 60s and 70s. And the heat release rate then and the heat release rate now in a structural fire is absolutely different. I challenge anybody to go in their house and walk around and find something that's not got varnish or got petroleum on it in some way. It's a fuel stick. I've talked enough, Chief.
Yeah, no, and great comment by Warren. The stats are saying that the heat release rate now could be 15 times what it was in legacy furnishings and so forth. So lots to talk about. Frank, you've been quiet. Anything you want to dive in on this conversation?
No, I obviously been in the fire service for quite a few years, and you know, this is somewhat of a new way of thinking. And you know, you and I spoke offline concerning a recent class we had from John Norman, the retired Deputy Chief of Operations from FDNY, and he was here in town a few weeks ago teaching basically what we've discussed all evening to our battalion chiefs and our county's battalion chiefs. Since we run automatic aid, we want to be thinking on the same wavelength. And really, I think his entire class was probably one of the best ones I've been in quite a while. But as I get thinking about it, going back over the years, it reminds me of even some classes I took at FDIC 20 years ago when they were talking about using smoothbore nozzles and some of the same things. So I think we've got to think and change the way we do things. And I'm thinking here the entire evening, we just sent a email to our training chief. Do we start beginning to think about this now with our recruit classes? And do those instructors even know about this? And what do they know? And how are they going to teach?
Great stuff. We're having a lively discussion in the chat room about smoothbore and fog. We're going to solve that debate once in a while. Yeah, I'm sure we'll solve that sooner or later.
Let me throw one for that. I got one for that. So
all right, go ahead.
We ought to have a discussion on whether it's a straight stream or a solid stream.
All right. So it's terminology, but remember that I saw some comments fly by. Remember that never doesn't have a place mostly in my world, right? The never and always, right? When you say it's never or it's always this in the fire ground, that's those words are very unforgiving in the fire service. Anything else as we begin to summarize? Thank you, Joe. I think this was a great discussion. I hope that people point to this video, to this YouTube video, because I think that this will be one that can get washed. I think that's important. Tim, thank you, Tim, again with another comment. What is the heat release rate now versus when you were trained? Wow, when you were trained versus now. So, certainly there's a great question to be asked. You're trained one way X number of years ago, and the fuels have changed in compartments and so forth in the structures. So I think it's been a great discussion. Any last comments before we wrap it up? We're just about at the 1 hour mark, so I'd like to be prompt. Anything else before we wrap up? Joe, once again, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing with the group and sharing with the viewers. I think it's important. And again, for the folks on the panel, if you don't mind, push this out on social media. Get the discussion going in a manner where we can actually make something out of it. I think it would be worthwhile. So we'll see you here again next week on Firefighting Today, the weekly roundtable. Couple of weeks, I think we have Frank is going to do a piece for us. Frank is going to do some training for us in a couple of weeks. I've reached out to him, so we just got the word on that. So we will see you here next week, Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Join us then, and until then, keep learning. Keep learning.